witness to there's not going to be a wedding moment following a bachelorette party. What went down? Here is a more upbeat story. The night before their city hall wedding, the bride and groom had separate big parties and got so wasted they both slept through the wedding. They didn't realize it until City Hall called asking where they were, and they decided frick it, we'll do it later. They did eventually get married, and still are as far as I know, over 20 years later. My uncle got left at altar on his wedding day. 5 years relationship. My granddad had to go up on altar, thank everyone for coming and say there would be no wedding. My uncle was heartbroken and went on a trip to New Zealand. He sat on plane next to a dude from there. He invited him to his family's home, and my uncle ended up marrying his sister. They are still together and have had 3 kids. She is awesome and all happy days. Eldest child 21 years. Best aunt. Bachelor party in Vegas. Bachelor hooks up with a girl, gives her his cell phone number so they can continue the party that night. Bride-to-be is sitting at home with the iPad getting all of the iMessages from the girl. She cancelled the wedding that day. Friend of mine had a bachelor party at the local strip club 2 days before the wedding. I was going to come later in the evening as I was flying in late for the bachelor party and wedding. Got a call right before takeoff that the groom had fallen from the upstairs in the VIP section and they believed had severed his spinal cord. Turns out he had severed his spinal cord and after a few months of rehab was fully paraplegic. Amazingly, the wedding did happen almost a year later. It puts things in perspective that she still stayed. I used to work at an upscale wedding venue. 2 weeks before a huge, expensive wedding, the groom's father dies, so they ask us to turn the wedding into a funeral instead. They were a lovely couple, and it was really awfully sad when it happened, but I still use it as my go-to answer for describe a time when you delivered outstanding customer service type questions in job interviews. Sorry. You're hired. I have a funeral planned for next week, hoping it will turn into a wedding. Several years ago, I got a phone call from the maid of honor for a wedding I was going to attend as a guest 2 weeks hence. She was flustered, but managed to get out there's no wedding. Groom called it off. He's in love with someone else. Well, I didn't press. I was friends with both, so I knew that the full details would eventually make their way back to me. Oh, and boy did they. Turns out, a couple weeks before the wedding, groom called bride and said he was coming over. They needed to talk. When he got to her apartment, he broke down in tears and confessed that he was in love with someone else. He loved her, but couldn't marry her because he didn't love her in the way a bride deserves. There was much crying and shouting over it all, but eventually the bride recovered from the news enough to ask him who he was in love with. Well, groom said, it's bride's brother. The wedding was definitely off at that point. Now, 5 or 6 years later, groom and bride's brother are married and happy. Though, I lost contact with bride shortly after her wedding plans went tee-up, so I'm not sure if she ever forgave the boys for that one. Well, it's a shame it got that far, but it's best for everyone that he figured that out before the wedding. After the wedding at the reception, the newlyweds took forever to show up. They were nearly an hour late. When they did arrive, they were arguing loudly the entire time. They got introduced and we all clapped as per tradition and they sat down at the main table in a huff. Sometime between the appetizer and the main course the argument started again. The groom stormed off and my girlfriend and I were nosy so we went to see what was up. He ended up in the hotel lobby on his cell phone. We thought nothing of it and we were about to go back when the wife shows up still obviously in her wedding dress and continues to ream him out. Now for the first time, we can hear what the argument is about. He had invited his ex to the wedding. She showed up to the ceremony and that threw the bride off. Apparently also, he had cheated on the new wife with the ex-girlfriend several times, with the last time being only about a month prior to the wedding. Additionally, the ex-girlfriend mistress was on her way to come pick up the new husband to take him away from the new bride. Cause she was acting crazy, according to the groom. After a couple minutes of watching this train wreck of an argument, a crappy rust bucket sedan shows up with the ex-girlfriend in it. The groom gets into the car with his ex or whatever the frick she is and they drive off. Last words went to the bride though, who screamed at him as he tore off. Well, I guess I'm going to go back to fricking your brother then, you butthole. So, they're no longer married now. All of these frickups just sound so expensive. My cousin runs a popular upscale marriage venue and always tells the story way better than this, so here is a rough overview. The groom's mom was a heavy drinker and got belligerent when she drank, so understandably the bride wanted the groom to try to limit her drinking. The afternoon before the wedding, the bride arrives to see groom's mom smashed, with the groom himself giving her beers. Next thing my cousin knows, she was there to oversee preparations. The bride and groom are in a straight up fist fight, which leads to an Anchorman style street fight between members of both families in the parking lot. Apparently they recently scheduled a new day for it. I can't imagine the tension there. I used to be a photographer. The first wedding I shot was one where the mother of the bride was a heavy drinker. At the reception she was pretty drunk and went up to give a speech. She started out with, "When my daughter told me she was getting married, I knew it was to one of two guys, and I'm glad it's you, John." John was not pleased. Friend invites me to his wedding. He and fiance are fairly poor, have lived together for years. They're both semi-disabled. His is PTSD, hers is physical, and on fixed incomes, and live in a somewhat expensive area. They have 3 gift registries: Target, Macy's, Crate and Barrel, and a huge invite list. Over 300 friends, family members. All the stuff on the registries is standard stuff like towels, coffee cups, flatware, etc. Anyway, people fly out, get ready for wedding. 2 days before wedding is bachelor party, and friend gets drunk and admits that she's not really his fiancée. They are just roommates and they have no intention of getting married, they just needed the stuff. They're going to cancel the wedding tomorrow and keep all the gifts. Had to protect him from getting his butt kicked by about 2 dozen people. Then had to have the fiancé come clean to everyone since he was too hungover. They ended up returning most of the gifts to people, but a surprising number of people let them keep the gifts. As his grandfather said, if you needed these things that badly to lie like this, you must have been very desperate. There's a story that goes around. I can't vouch for the truth of it or not. Call it an urban legend. First of all, if you've never been to a Jewish wedding, the way it goes is, first they have the reception, with the bride and groom in separate rooms, then the ceremony, then family goes away to sit for pictures while the guests sit down to eat, then the bride and groom come in and the dancing starts. In between the ceremony and the pictures, though, is what's called yichud, which doesn't really translate, but it approximately means isolation together. The bride and groom lock themselves in a room and are observed by 2 reliable witnesses outside the door to have stayed therein long enough to have consummated the marriage. Although nobody actually does it there, it's considered deckless. This is what actually solemnizes the marriage. Well, one of 3 things. The other 2 are signing a marriage contract, called a ketubah, and transfer of a piece of chattel property, traditionally a ring, though it can be other things, from the groom to the bride. So, after the yichud, the bride comes out and announces, "Sorry everyone, the wedding's off. We'll be getting a divorce, and we're returning all the gifts, except for the bedroom set, where I caught my new husband trying it out with my sister last week." So, there are far worse stories here in this very thread. What makes this one noteworthy? Well, think about this. She knew about the episode before the wedding. Why'd she go through with it? Because under Jewish law, if you've once been married to a woman, even after divorcing her, you aren't allowed to marry her sister at any time until your first wife has died. By going through with the ceremony, she in effect locked her sister out of ever being able to get together with her soon-to-be ex. As someone with a decent amount of Orthodox friends, that's freaking hilarious. She's definitely gonna be able to get while also throwing a huge middle finger at the sister. Paramedic. Bachelor party mixed with drunk driving. One of the groomsmen killed. Believe the entire wedding was cancelled and the couple split up. One of my best friend's wedding was cancelled when he learned she slept with a stripper after her bachelorette party, like 3 days after. He is happily remarried now with a kid. Worst part was that it was a destination wedding honeymoon and he couldn't get a refund, so we all went anyway and he was super depressed the whole time. His family was all there too. I had a buddy that happened to also. True story. He ended up banging one of his fiance's friends as revenge, which she knew about, but they just let bygones be bygones, and they still got married. Eye for an eye, I guess, and it worked out. They've been married for 8 years, but we never talk about it. Hi there, part-time wedding planner here. I have a few of these. 1. Obligatory sex. 1. The bachelor party and the bachelorette party were being held in the same hotel in New Orleans. I tried to get them to do separate venues but knew the group discount would cover an extra day in Carmel. They begin at 8 p.m. and collide drunkenly at about 3 a.m. It was some kind of drunken fistfight CM orgy and everyone was so ashamed the next morning they called it off. Good news everyone. They made up 6 months later and got married. They picked something simple, like their backyard this time. 2. Freaking weird sex. 1. Bachelorette party turned out to be Homestuck themed, complete with Homestuck male strippers. Please for the love of Christ do not ask where I found those. It got weird and the groom walked in on the bride riding a candy corn colored horn. Groom noped the frick out. 3. The best one. So the couple has been sleeping together for a few years. She gets pregnant and decide to get married. Months of planning go by and she begins to show. Bride's parents wig right the frick out, call her a S, and forbid her to get married. They cancel the wedding, steal her parents' car to elope, and torch the garage on their way out. It was magnificent. I did not get paid. I like number 3. Buddy of mine went out night before wedding, crashed his car and died. They dated for like 5 years and the morning of the wedding, he was dead. This thread is substantially more depressing than I bargained for. Sorry for your loss. I woke up on a Sunday and saw on the news that a bachelorette party had been burned alive after the limo caught fire by itself on a bridge towards San Francisco. It was the start of a crap day. I remember this story from a couple years ago, and the limo driver just GTFO'd and left them there. Horrifying. My friend had been with his fiancée of 8 years when she got pregnant. Fast forward 8 months and we decide that because they are basically common law married we need to throw him a bachelor party. So we go to the nearest big city and he's abused by strippers and we're all quite drunk when he gets the call that his fiancée is in labor. None of us is in any state to drive. We end up calling a cab and paying over $300 to get him to the hospital as soon as possible. My friend is stumbled down drunk when he walks into the delivery room smelling like strippers, with a dong drawn on his face and covered in glitter. I was positive that was the end. They've been married 7 years and just had their second child last week. Thank you for sharing something not depressing. Sister of the groom chatted with the sister of the bride. Just casual conversation but it came to light that almost 100% of what the bride had said besides her name was a complete lie. Sister of the groom calls him up and says he really needs to figure out if this is right. A few fights and some long thinking later the groom leaves her and leaves town. It got worse though. Turns out pretty much all the bride's friends had been lied to as well. They all stopped talking to her. College friend was to get married to a guy she had only known for 4 months. She found out where the bachelor party was and wandered in to find the groom getting some head from the best man. Best man being a true bro. While they're working the night before a wedding at a hotel, the staff and I heard a loud scream from upstairs. Cue the bride screaming and sobbing shouting the wedding's off while storming out the place followed by the groom stark bollock naked covering his nether regions with his hands apologizing profusely. It turns out she caught the mother of the bride and the groom shagging. Safe to say we had an easy shift the next day as we didn't have a wedding to cater for. I just wanted to see what you'd be like in 20 years. Neighbor's jealous harpy frenemies convinced her to cheat on the husband to be at the bachelorette party. Her friends were very drunk and Snapchatted evidence to him as a joke. Obviously, he didn't take it that well and left her, packed up all his things in their apartment and drove to his parents instead of getting married. Bride apparently didn't leave her room for about 3 weeks, totally distraught with how her relationship fell apart. Fast forward 6 months later, the two are talking again. Not sure if they are trying to make things work. Best friend's bachelor party a few years ago. He had dated his fiancée for 6 or 7 years at that point. She made a male friend at work that became a groomsman. I hated him, didn't trust him and told my buddy that. The night of the party after huge amounts of alcohol the groom breaks down crying, leaves and walks home. Didn't say anything to anyone, just left. Found out the next day that the bride-to-be had been banging the piece of crap groomsman for months and they were trying to work through it. He couldn't get past it and cancelled the wedding. In the early 90s my friend's brother was getting married. The night before the groom and best man decided they should kill the ex-boyfriend of the bride. They did. They got caught, and the wedding was cancelled. For obvious reasons. As far as I know, the two are still serving time. That was not the ending I expected. You have been visited by the magical duck. You don't have to do anything. He will simply give you a good day today. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.